Hola, students. This is Miss Trivet, and we are working on lesson 4 from chapter 6 on page 270 in our green textbook. Today's all about absolute value, and our learning target has that in it. So we're going to write down, I can find the absolute value of a number. We're going to start off with a little bit of vocabulary. We have this word here, absolute value, that some of you may have never heard of before. So at the top of page 270, it says, the absolute value of a number is the distance between the number and 0 on a number line. The absolute value of a number is always written with 2 lines on the outside of the number. So we're going to jot down a little bit of notes about this word. So starting out with the word itself. What is the absolute value? Where what I just read said it's the distance away from 0. And another key point is the absolute value is always a positive number because when we're looking at the distance from something, it's always going to be a positive. For example, if you measured the distance from the wall to the other wall in the classroom, you wouldn't say it's a negative 7 meters. You would always say it's a positive number when we're dealing with distance. So an absolute value answer is always positive. So we're going to write always a positive answer. And then the last thing we want to write down is what do the symbols look like? If wanting you to find the absolute value, you have these 2 big bars on the outside of a number. For example, if I have 2 big bars around the -2, well, that would be asking me what's the absolute value of -2. And on a number line, if this is my 0, here would be -1, this would be -2. Well, the distance from 0 is +2 jumps away from 0. So the absolute value of -2 would be a 2. 2 jumps away from 0. And it's the same thing as if I had the absolute value bars around the +2. The distance from 0, well, there's 1, there's 2. How many hops away is +2 from 0? Well, it's 1, 2 hops. So the absolute value of -2 is 2 hops, and the absolute value of +2 is also 2 hops away from 0. So we always have a positive answer when they're asking you absolute value. So when you see these big bars around a number, they're asking you for how many hops away from 0 is that number. With that being said, we can go ahead and start working through our examples because most of this lesson centers just around that right there. So let's talk about example 1. Finding absolute value. A says find the absolute value of 3. So we want absolute value of 3. So we're going to do the big bars around 3. Well, 3 is how many hops away from 0? I know some of you don't have to draw the number line here, but just so we have a little bit in our notes, 1, 2, 3, we would say, well, that is 3 hops away from 0. So absolute value of 3 is 3. And that was example 1A. Example 1B, find the absolute value of -2.5. So if I have my bars around -2.5, well, if I drew a little number line, which again, I know some of you don't have to find the answer, here's 0, -1, -2, -3, -2.5 would be right here. How many hops away from 0 is -2.5? Well, it's 1, 2.5 hops. So our final answer would be 2.5. So you basically just take this number in the bars and you make it a positive. That's all you got to do. If you want to pause the video and try a couple on your own, they're at the bottom of page 270. Okay, number 1 is 8. Number 2 is 6. Number 3 is 0. number 4 is 1/4, number 5 is 7 1/3, and number 6 is 12.9. Moving on to example 2, they're wanting us to compare some values. So we'll switch to a new color here. Compare 2 and the absolute value of -5. So here's our directions. Compare 2 and we have -5 with those absolute value bars around it. So if we were to graph these on a horizontal number line, sorry, that line is super not straight. Here is our 0. Here's 1, +2. So our +2 would be sitting here. -5 would be down here. However, since the absolute value bars are sitting there, we would have to figure out how many hops that would be away. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. How many hops is -5? Whoops, I went a little too far there. How many hops away from 0 is that -5? Well, that would be like saying 5 hops. So if I'm comparing 2 and -5, the absolute value of -5, I'm really comparing 2 and 5. So what we can do in our final answer is say that 2 is less than 5. 2 and 5. So you really don't need to look at this number down here. You would find the absolute value answer first and compare those two numbers. And 2 is less than +5. Pause the video again and try the next set of on your owns on page 271. All right, if you tried those, number 7 is the greater than symbol opening to the left. Number 8 is the less than symbol opening to the right. Number 9 is the less than symbol opening to the right. And number 10 should be the equal to symbol. Example 3 is taking this more into a real life situation, as they like to do at the end of every lesson. Yikes, that 3 is interesting. Okay. This one's all about animals and elevations. It says the table shows the elevations of several animals. I'm assuming this is where they like to live, in the sea. It says A, which animal is the deepest, and explain. And then B, is the shark or the sea lion closer to sea level? So let's take a look at the chart and list on our journals what information they give us. They tell us that the shark is going to be at -4 feet. They tell us that the sea lion is going to be at 5 feet. The seagull lives at 56 feet above sea level. The shrimp is going to live at -65 feet below sea level. And the turtle is going to live at -22 feet below sea level. So if we think about sea level like a vertical number line, 0 would be right where the water starts on the beach. So this right here would be a 0, meaning the beach, right on the edge of the beach. Anything above sea level is going to be dry land. And if the animal lives below that, it's going to be in the water. It lives in the water. So if we try and think about our questions they're asking us here, question 1 says, which animal is the deepest? So basically they're asking which animal is farthest away downwards in the water. So if we look at the ones that are in the water, well, we have -4 being in the water, -65 being in the water, and -22 in the water. And -65 would be the deepest or the farthest away from 0. So for question A, which one is the deepest? We're going to say that the shrimp is the deepest because it's farthest down below that 0. And then for question B, is the shark or the sea lion closer to sea level? So remember, this 0, we would call it the beach, or we can call that sea level. where the sea begins. So they want to know which animal between the shark and the sea lion is closest to 0. So the sea lion is at 5 and the shark is at -4. So here's my shark. Let's just pretend that's -4. And here's my sea lion at +5. If I figure out the distance, or basically the absolute value of these two, I'm going to know which one is higher and which one's lower. So we're basically trying to figure out the absolute value of 4 and the absolute value of 5. So -4 is 4 hops away from 0, and +5 is 5 hops away from 0. So when they say which one is closer to 0, we want which one is less hops away. We're going to say that the 4 is less hops away, and that is our shark. So the shark is closer to sea level. And you can pause one more time and try out number 11 if you'd like, on the bottom of page 271. And the answer to number 11 is the seagull, because the absolute value of 56 is less than the absolute value of -65. The seagull is closer to 0 feet, or sea level. And there we go for that lesson.